Welcome to the For the Love of the Game podcast with your host, Jefferson Belfort and Brian Hernandez. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm doing pretty good this morning. We're actually recording on a Saturday morning. This is, I think, our first like legit morning kind of podcast. The lighting's always on point during these times, but I'm feeling good. There's been a lot of like some fun news in basketball world this week, so I'm excited to get into that.
Yep. Definitely love a morning burn type of podcast. Bright and early, got rest of the day, and
Yep.
got some interesting topics that we were going to hit today. So I can't wait.
Yes, let's do this.
All right. So some of the topics that we're going to hit today are starting with the Pacers rebuild, our quote unquote rebuild, um, the drama in Rip City with the Blazers and all. And hey, I'm sure everybody's getting caught up with that. And then Zion and his weight concerns, then the new unvaccinated player restrictions that have been levied by the NBA. Are you ready, Brian?
Yeah, let's do it. I'd say so. Like you mentioned, first topic, the Pacers looking to blow it up. They're looking to blow it up. They're looking to get rid of Caris Levert, Domantis Sabonis, Myles Turner. These are kind of been, or these have been their biggest guys. Caris Levert, I mean, they just traded for him last season, and I guess they're kind of looking at it and they're like, we are not going to win a championship with this team. So, we got some good young pieces. We got some still good pieces. They're not looking to trade. What's his face? Their point guard. I'm blanking on his name.
Malcolm Brogdon.
Yeah, Brogdon. They're not looking to trade Brogdon. They can't even trade him because they just extended him. So I think for the rest of this year he's untradeable. But it's crazy. They're just kind of looking to blow it all up, and these are three solid players that teams are going to really covet for. And Jeff, what do you think about this?
I think first starting off, you got to talk about where they're at right now. They're 12 and 16, so they're not even 500
Yeah.
ball club, but they're on a 4-game winning streak. So who knows where they land at the end of this season? But I don't know. I'm a little. I have a mixed feeling about the whole rebuild for this team because you know we always talk about teams that get into perpetual like rebuild where it seems like every season they're talking about rebuilding or there's the thought of they should blow it up in some sorts. And I think the Pacers are actually one of the teams I thought would stay pat where they are, stand pat where they are currently. Because when you look at the roster from top to bottom, yes, they have question marks coming off the bench, but those three players that you said that they put on the waivers, on the trading block, are three impact players that just last night they showed their reason why they're on the team, what they can bring to the table. Karis having a 26-point game last night. Sabonis doing what he does every game, and then Myles Turner is an exceptional player. So like it is confusing to see that they're ready to give up on these players because these players are solid players, and much like you said, they would be coveted by other teams. Now, the real question that comes of it is what does the fans is like to hop into other Reddits and see what they're thinking. And from the Pacers Reddit, it seems like the consensus is they're not really that apt to doing a rebuild. Granted, I understand sometimes you get emotional as a fan and attached to certain players. That could be the reason. But I'm of the mindset that they kind of should stay pat. Like they really do have a good core. They just need to find the right guys to put together with them because when we're all realistically looking at it, I don't think that there's anything that they can do to stop what's on the top of the East right now.
Yeah.
On the top plate of the East is the Bucks, the Nets, the Heat, and the Bulls right now. So I think they should mirror something of what Bulls did and try to accumulate as much talent as they possibly can. But find some players that are a little bit more defensively sound.
Yeah.
I know that's the deficiency that they're getting from the guys that they have right now.
So you mentioned that right now their record was 12-16, and so they're currently 13th in the East. And it's surprising to me when I see this, because when you actually look at the advanced stats right now, Indiana is actually the 5th best offense in the league, and they're the 14th ranked defense in the league. And it's like, these are numbers that should translate to at least a 500 team right now. And yet they're actually not there. They're just not playing as good as you would think. I mean, of course, there's also been some injury things here and there, COVID protocols here and there, but still, I mean, as well, Myles Turner is actually having a very good year. Out of all those guys, Sabonis kind of having a little bit down shooting year. Caris Levert having a down shooting year. He's shooting 29% on 4.5 attempts. Sabonis is shooting 31% from three on 2.5 attempts. And then Myles Turner is actually shooting 40% from three on 5 attempts a game. And he's having 2.7 blocks. He's doing what he normally does. But he's actually just stretching the floor. And actually, it's surprising that they aren't winning as many games as they should. Something that was actually kind of interesting. So we looked at it and we're like, all right, the Pacers are trying to trade these 3 guys. They're trying to blow it up. But as well, it's not just one-sided. Myles Turner has actually come out and openly come out and said, like, he does want to trade. The quote that I have here is that Myles Turner said, "I'm not valued as anything more than a glorified role player, and I want something more opportunity. I hold myself in a higher regard than that." It's, yeah. Tell me what you think.
So it gives me a little bit of like the Anthony Davis experiment. And sometimes I think there's a culture to winning, right? There really is a culture to becoming a winning player, right? So I think Myles Turner's been in the league long enough to be the type of guy, if he was going to be the type of guy that garnishes winning, right? And that's where I see I see the comparisons of like what I'm seeing in Anthony Davis's. Davis's reason why he can't impact winning is because he's just not on the floor, right?
Yeah.
So yes, Myles Turner's is a little bit. It was Myles Turner's situation is a little bit different. He's not really as injury prone as AD, but like you got to start thinking about what is he doing that is causing not as much of an impact to winning. I would say first thing is the change of guard of how the game is played. The big man just does not is not the biggest guy, top 5 guys in win shares anymore. They're typically a good to have if you see in most situations. And honestly, I would argue since the late 90s, it's been that way, where it's been the wing. If you have an exceptional wing, that's what's going to carry you to a championship. You could have a Shaq. I agree. Yes, Shaq was dominant in his time when he was winning with the Lakers, but Shaq was there in 96 to 99, and Kobe Bryant wasn't Kobe Bryant until 99. And from that point forward, they looked dominant. So it just goes to show you have to have that dominant, exceptional wing. And what are they going to do to find that? Or where does he go where he's paired with a wing where he's impacting winning in that sense?
Yeah, and like you mentioned about like the centers are a nice to have, and that's just very true. Like we only see as of right now, at least off the top of my head, there's kind of 2 centers that are like, okay, you can carry the team, and that's Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. And after that, the drop off from centers is pretty heavy. It goes straight to, like you're saying, a nice to have. And Myles Turner does fall into that category, sadly. I mean, he right now he is changing his game to fit the more modern game of his previous years. He really wasn't a great 3-point shooter or anything like that. So far, I mean, throughout 27 games, he's putting a good sample size out there that he has worked on this. I actually do follow Myles Turner on Twitter, and over the offseason, I did see like ton of workout videos from him. It seemed like he really wanted to stress working on the three ball. And so far, it's paying dividends. Something that I thought was interesting that I wanted to bring up about this whole Myles Turner situation of like, I know being a Knicks fan, there's actually a ton of interest from the Knicks potentially making a trade for Myles Turner. There was, even in the offseason, so I have a quote here from Ian Bagley, who's like one of the most reputable Knicks reporters, but he said that some Knicks decision makers felt last season that the club needed a big man that can stretch the floor. And they were actually looking to Myles Turner and trading for him, but nothing worked out at the time. And this is actually, I can kind of see like this is verified, and like the Knicks actually really wanted a 3-point shooting big man, because they told Nerlens Noel and Taj Gibson, like, please work on your three ball in the offseason. And then so far, none of them are shooting three, so it's definitely not good enough. But I would say the Knicks are probably going to be pretty heavy into Myles Turner going into this. It's not, I mean, of course, trades are available right now, but the big day is December 15th, because when December 15th comes up, that is when all the players during the offseason who signed the contract are available to be traded. So you have guys like, I'm not saying Kemba Walker is going to be traded to Indiana, but that's when he's going to be available. All their guys, Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel, all these guys that signed contracts, they're going to be available to trade.
My thing is, I wanted to add too, is like all three of those guys are not the type of guys that you could 1-for-1 trade.
Yeah.
Some team is going to expect some more value coming from the trade as well. So who else is on the roster, unless if you're pairing 2 out of the 3 of these guys, are you going to move that's going to get the type of return that they want? I'm assuming they want draft picks, right? You can't put Myles Turner in a lot of these situations where he's going to be in a winner and then the team's going to get draft picks. So, right. I think the one issue that I have is that if you watch Pacers game, one thing that always seems to happen in my mind is that Myles Turner can regress to the back, where you almost forget that he's on the floor. And then the way how they play now, they're playing a lot through Karis and Duarte at this point right now. And then it's a little confusing because they brought in Karis, but Duarte is playing well, and they both do the same thing, you know. So obviously they've chose which way they're going to go, which path they're going to go, by saying that Karis is the one that they're ready to give up, and then I'm sure that the future is now Duarte and on the Pacers. But before you make that decision, you got to sit and think about, what are we going to do to help Duarte advance his career if we're going to choose to make him that guy? I think realistically, I've seen a few trade packages. I've seen a few ideas that Pacers fans, other fans, mock trades that they've thrown, and none of them, in my mind, like moved the needle towards rebuild. It looks like they're trying to mesh things to work. And I think that once you make the decision that you're going to rebuild, even if it means that you're taking back parts that doesn't make sense at that moment, you got to make that decision right away that, hey, this might be a lesser situation that we're going to get into, but through smart scouting and trading and drafting, we'll be able to pinpoint the guys that fit what we're trying to do. It's a lot of just mix and match right now with what they have on their team.
You know, what you actually brought up there is very interesting to me, because I'm thinking about it. So you mentioned that looking at their roster and look at these guys, like maybe they actually aren't trying to rebuild. And thinking about it, they just hired Rick Carlisle as their coach. Rick Carlisle is definitely not coming onto a rebuilding team. This guy's gonna want to win. It's the front office is gonna want to win, and they drafted Duarte. He's an older rookie too, so you want to be able to make use of these years now while he's still on his rookie contract. You just extended Malcolm Brogdon, and like it looks like maybe they actually aren't trying to rebuild, and maybe a lot of these guys like Caris Levert maybe is a potentially a third option, maybe a second option at most. Sabonis, I think Sabonis is at most a second option on a team, and maybe they're just trying to trade and package these guys to potentially get someone even bigger. The one problem is there kind of isn't anyone of a number one option status out there on the market, at least as we can see. We'll talk more about Ben Simmons, but I mean, it seemed like there was the conversation about in the offseason of the Pacers and Ben Simmons, and that seemed to go nowhere at that time. I'm not even saying Ben Simmons is the number one option either, and it's just like, yeah, it's it's a mess there.
See, Ben Simmons always finds his way to the pod. I'll always say that.
Always. It's hilarious. But do you have anything else you want to say about the Pacers before we move on?
To be continued is the theme for them right now. Is like I said, they're on a winning streak right now. Let's see how far it takes them. But maybe there's people on Reddit that are saying maybe this was just something to light the fire under these guys to start playing a little bit better. But I think that, and I've seen 3 years of rebuilding. Trust me, I've seen enough rebuilds to say this is that the best way to do rebuild is a clean break. Just like cut an addiction or something, you got to go cold turkey on it, right? So clean break is how you do it. So if they're going to blow up everybody, leave the young guys, and then let them figure it out from there.
Yeah, no, completely agree. It's there's nothing worse than being like the 8th seed or even just missing the playoffs, so you're not getting a top pick, but yet you still aren't good enough. Like that is the no man's zone, and too often the Pacers have kind of been in that zone. And it's just I want to see them like do better. The Pacers have a lot of good talent. Duarte is a really good player. That was an awesome draft pick that they got, and they could be good.
I got a perfect analogy for them. It's like the girl that's a 6 that thinks she's a 10, so she doesn't get with 5s or lower, but she can't get a 7 or 8 to commit to her because they think she's a 6. So now you're just stuck there with nobody. That's what the Pacers feel like. They're just right there trying to figure it out. They know they can't get better, exorbitantly better with this current roster, but gonna have to figure something out.
There definitely has to be some changes, so we'll see what's going on there. Next, Blazers drama. So there's actually a ton of news that's been coming out since the Blazers fired their GM, and what the thesis right now, the thought process is. As soon as Neil O'Shea got fired, he went to his man Woj and started leaking everything. He started telling him all the news. He started talking all the trash. And this is why we have this now. So there's a report by Woj saying that Dame is going to want a 2-year, $107 million extension. And that right now, it seems like that, because people, this is kind of like widely known, and for their new GM search, this is kind of putting a hinder to that. And whoever is coming in is going to be afraid of that, because no one wants to commit to Damian Lillard when this extension would go into, I think, when he's like 35, 36, 37, like around that age, which is usually a decline of an NBA player's career. And he wants to be paid like $50 million a year for those years. Jeff, what do you think about this?
It's funny that he said the whole Neil O'Shea thing because Dame actually tweeted recently, or subtweeted, tweeted, um, post where someone had it was like a picture of Donald Trump shaking someone's hand,
It was
and it's like
Pence.
this is
Yeah.
Woj, yeah, Woj and Neil O'Shea coming together for this
Yeah.
one, and then like Dame literally said, "Yeah, that's facts." Like
Yeah.
so, he, you know, I like that we're in a time where players are going to help control the narrative, so to
Yeah.
speak, so that they could diffuse if it's real or fake for us. And Dame is not afraid to do that. If he sees BS flying on his name or flying on the team, he will say it unequivocally that it is not true. So that's great because now we don't have as much smoke and mirrors, especially with a team that's going through these woes where we just really don't know what's going on. You saw him be like shush off some of the detractions about him and Phillips not getting along together and the team not getting along together. So I'm happy to have that we could have like a star player like stand up for his coach in that sense and say like there's nothing going on in that sense where we're upset with him or we're upset with how he's implementing things. But at the same time, drama is damning. Like it's so much, and it goes back to stuff we spoke about in the beginning of the podcast. Is beginning of when we started this podcast, is that um uh the Trailblazers look like a poor man's Nuggets.
Yeah.
Like they everything that the Nuggets got right, even though granted they have some injury issues going on right now. Everything that went right for them is completely the opposite what the Blazers do, you know? And because of that, they're kind of stuck in no man's land. And you have a guy that keeps on saying that he wants to stay here, but there's literally no one that would want to be in the type of situation that he's in.
Yeah.
I don't care about loyalty. I don't care about all of that. Everyone wants to say that you want to remain loyal. Granted, that sounds nice. It sounds like a fairy tale, you know, like
Yeah.
that's what that sounds like. But when it and we come to the end of the season and you guys are a few games over 500 and losing in the first round, if that's the highest ceiling I see for them, we're back at square one again, and then we're wondering what's going on with this team.
Yeah, there's exactly what you're saying. And a lot of people online that I've seen have kind of been like, oh, the reason why that Dame was putting on these theatrics in the off season, saying, I'm so loyal, I never want to leave. Blazers where my city's at, is like he's trying to prove to the Blazers organization, like, yes, give me this extension, give me this money, because like I'm gonna be here long term, and this is where I want to win a championship. Even though, like you said, like the ceiling for them is not close to a championship. Um, yeah, this whole Dame situation is interesting. I thought what you mentioned about the Billups thing. I wonder how much when Dame comes out and he says like, "Stop, that's cap." Like, no, it's not real, not true. I wonder how real that is, because Billups actually come out and said that he's never seen before for the Blazers. He's never seen a second unit, the bench unit, having to come off the bench to give life to their first unit, because right now like their first unit is just not playing up to par and they're not giving energy. And as we see, like with their defensive metrics are actually pretty awful. They're ranked 29th in the NBA right now for defense, and it's their second unit giving them life. And it's like, I wonder if there is some tension there, if there is anything there. Um, I mean, like we always say with all these things, it's to be determined. But there's a few things that actually also happened for this. So for the Blazers, new GM search. They're trying to get this new GM. There's a couple of names already thrown out there. Another one just got thrown in the ring. Danny Ainge is a potential candidate Jeff, what do you think about Danny H potentially coming back to be a GM again?
Yeah, so yeah, from like 2008, everyone always speaks about the championship he brings, but like I think he is widely overrated. Um, Guy has been a great GM, but like you also got to keep in mind, yeah, everyone always speaks about how he quote unquote fleeced a whole bunch of teams, and you don't win championships for fleecing teams, right? It's what you do with those picks. Granted, he got two of the best players, young players in the league currently, in Jaylen Brown
Tatum.
and Jason Tatum. But thing is, I think smart drafting hasn't been done for the Celtics in a while, because it seems like they do what they've chosen is just top of the litter. They
Yeah.
get guys from the top of the litter, so you have a 50-50 chance that this guy's going to make it or not with that, with those odds when you're picking that high in the draft, right? But when you look at the end of margins picks, where's the guys that he really brought in that's going to help a situation? We talked about it before, how that's where we feel the Trailblazers are missing, or what they're missing is they never really find those guys in the margins that turns out to be a solid player. There's a number of guys that are on that team that are solid in one way or the other, where you have guys like Nas, you have guys like Afrini. All of them have their flaws, and what they bring to the table is just not enough for what you need for the Blazers to be successful. So I just don't think the fit with Danny Ainge makes sense. And then everyone now is going to just be apt to being scared to trade with a guy like that when you have that moniker on you that you fleece everyone.
Yeah, it's it's exactly what you said, of no one's gonna want to trade with him. And we've seen that this is true. We've seen that this is what happens. Yet look, he got fired from his last job because he was in a good situation. He has a ton of draft picks, he had a ton of assets, and he did nothing with it. Now he's going to go to a team with no assets, barely anything, and turn it around. I don't know if he's the right guy for that. There's definitely has to be someone else better.
Exactly. And then just to add to that too is you got to think about it on the opposite side of it. He kind of is fearful of making that trade too, because now he fears that I'm going to get fleeced. So that's the issue that we've seen a number of superstar players that have been in the running, they've been in the running for, and they never pulled the trigger on any of them, So
yeah,
I just don't like the fit.
Yeah, though I also don't like the fit. We'll see what happens. But yeah, not great. Next though, for the Blazers still, CJ McCollum, collapsed lung. This man, sad that that this happened to him, but this is even more like hurting the Blazers' potential to actually do anything, because right now, or so far, CJ McCollum was actually having a really good year this year. I mean, listening to if you ever listen to his podcast on the three and the old man, or I forget the the name off the top of my head right now, but JJ Redick's podcast, CJ McCollum, like, he talked about all the time of he always would get injured when he was having like a really good year or something like that, and then it would set him back a lot. And this year he came back, he was healthy, he was averaging 20 points a game, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and shooting 40% from 3 on 8 attempts a game. Like, this is the old CJ McCollum that we want to see. And it's sad that this happened. And this kind of like puts a hinder on the Blazers, because now you want to trade for somebody. CJ McCollum was the guy you were always going to trade. Now this guy has a collapsed lung and a history of injuries, and it's a mess. What do you think about the situation?
So, it's just CJ is just in such a predicament where good enough player that he could be considered a fringe all-star player,
Yeah.
each and every year, but he's in the stacked West. Not as stacked as before, but he's typically in the stacked West where it's hard to choose him to be an all-star. But he's shown that he has game, right? But another one of the issues that comes with this is just it's CJ has injury, he's injury prone as well. So which team is actually getting up so crazy to want to add him to their team? Is no one is really blowing up the Blazers phones to basically say, hey, I want to be I want to get CJ McCollum, So that's my first issue that comes with this. Second, CJ McCollum is in my eyes is nothing more than a high value third option, right? I don't think that he would be the second option on a really good team. Our NBA championship ready team. So my fear is that because of that, like you now are sitting here wondering, like, damn, like how do we get better? And CJ McCollum, you thought was going to be that gem to get better, but I think we're 3-4 years removed from when they should have moved him. Now that's what it feels like in my mind. He had seasons when they went to the Western Conference Finals where he looked amazing, and I thought that he was going to at some point either be a piece that they move to get better, because that year when they went to the Western Conference Finals, it was glaring that they could not be more than this. So you thought that he would get moved, but they haven't decided to do that, and now they're suffering from it because now it's almost going to be a point where is CJ going to be disgruntled because he's hearing his name in the news every day, and he's hearing that Dame wants to be with someone else, and I don't know. I really don't think that there's a perfect situation where you go to where it makes him better, but I actually got a trade thought.
All right, let me hear it.
I don't think I've heard any of this yet from anyone yet that I think would be honestly shake the league first, could directly impact the number of championships that Dame wins, that this other superstar that would be on this team would win, and how it would greatly impact both their narratives and their legacies. So then not only that, I think it makes Portland Trailblazers better now than they are currently constituted. It really is just a theory trade. I don't think that both teams will pull the trigger. One team might want it more, but I'm thinking the most ideal, realistic trade is a trade for with the Bucks is get Lillard to Milwaukee, and you get you give up Middleton, you give up Holiday as well. I believe they both have bloated contracts, but if you could find a way to move those two guys, and then get Dame to the Bucks, I think Giannis is the perfect guy to block off some of the deficiencies that Lillard has in his games defensively. Obviously, as I'm speaking, Giannis is all over the court. Like, dude's all over the court, so he could always pick up anything. You have a guy that is game ready, that can take the difficult shots. We saw them beat the Suns, but I think if you have Lillard on that team, there's no chance that the Suns even stood a chance against them, right? And then for the Blazers, why I like this is you get a Middleton in a point in his career where he's confident in his game. You make him the guy at that point. Granted, it's not the best, but you now have him paired up with CJ McCollum and paired up with once again with Holiday. That's a solid team that could make a run for the playoffs, and then see what you do with that team for X amount of years. But
Yeah.
obviously, I don't think that's a trade that's going to happen. But
Yeah.
I think it would be an amazing trade for both teams in that sense.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of fun. It'd definitely be a lot of fun. And just to see like a huge mix up like that. And we know that it could work extremely well, or it should work extremely well for the Bucks. And to see Chris Middleton have like a bigger role, that'd be a lot of fun. The one problem is though, and there's another report that from the Blazers, for some reason, they're I mean, not some reason, but they're extremely stubborn in this Damian Lillard situation. That they've come out and said that they are not trading Damian Lillard, no matter what. That they don't want to get rid of him. He's their guy. He's staying on that team. So and there's constant. You see the videos of Damian Lillard saying, "I have not asked for a trade. I do not want to trade," and it's just like it really seems like this man is not going to leave the situation, and he's potentially trying to get the bag. He's trying to get the 2 years, $107 million extension, and it seems like that's definitely possible. There was. Hey, do you have anything you want to say before I move on to another thing about the Blazers?
I would say lightly, you got to consider, you would think that because Dame played with this guy for like 3 years, is he would take on the cautionary tales of Carmelo Anthony, who had a similar situation where,
Yeah.
He needed something and they never really got it to him. There was chances for him to leave. He never took them. And now look where he's at right now in his career. So Dame should keep that in mind. And like, I love that people want to be loyal and think that you could win that way, but there's no one in the last 30 years that's winning that way. Even when we bring up Giannis and we talk in that sense, Middleton became more of a household name. Holiday became more of a household name. He had Brook Lopez. He had good a good amount of players for him to win that championship, and still it's regarded as an anomaly to how people typically win championships.
Yeah. I love that comparison you brought up to Carmelo Anthony because the Blazers in that Knicks situation is very similar of you have a dysfunctional front office that has a superstar and they are trying to build around them and they're just throwing everything that they have, all their assets to try to get a player. They get that player. That doesn't work out. Now let's get another player. That also doesn't work out. And the next thing you know, doing this for 5, 8 years, you kind of ran out of everything. And it got to the point for the Knicks, they had no more assets. They realized they're not going to be able to do anything with Carmelo Anthony. So it's time for a rebuild. But what it looks like for the Blazers is they have no more assets. It is time for a rebuild. But yet they're like, we're sticking with our man. He's here. He's loyal to us. And it's like, all right. Now, if you guys do this, then you're kind of nothing's gonna happen for the next another 5 years that Dame's gonna be there, which is sad. So I feel I'm afraid for any any GM that wants to take this position because it's like you're landing on mine right there.
Yes, you are.
Next for same thing. So there's a report for the Blazers that Dame wants to play with Ben Simmons. And I thought something that was interesting. So if they were going to try to do a trade for Ben Simmons, if they're still trying to do more, the Blazers at the moment have an interim GM. So this is not one of the main guys. So that's kind of interesting. Are they going to make a giant move while they have an interim GM? But at the same time, Woj has been saying that the 76ers have been their trade conversations for Ben Simmons have been gaining momentum, and that there's potential that there's something that could happen soon. I mean, all this time we've had to wait till this December 15th deadline that I brought up before, or not deadline, but the time period that I brought up before. So it's interesting. Dame wants to play with Ben Simmons, but is it going to happen? Jeff, what do you think?
Oh, definitely not. There's been reports that the Sixers are not interested in CJ McCollum.
Yeah,
So, I believe it was sometime this week they discussed that,
yeah,
or that was reported, right? So if they're not going to take CJ McCollum, what do you think they're going to package together to give to the Sixers to give up on Ben Simmons?
yeah,
Ben Simmons, it's already a lost cause, right? But at this point, there's still more around the league I think they could leverage to get a guy like Ben Simmons. Granted, Ben Simmons is a more unique situation than the Kyrie situation, but I think he's more apt and ready to be traded
yeah,
than Kyrie Irving would be, because his issues he can control. Kyrie
yeah,
cannot control his situation, right? So, with that in mind, it makes me just sit here and think, like, realistically, nothing I could think that the Blazers would package together that would say, this is going to work for the Sixers. And then the Sixers have all the leverage with Ben Simmons. Like, they
yeah,
really do. With 3 years left on a contract, they can make this as awkward as possible. And they have the most awkward GM president in NBA in Daryl Morey. So, it definitely will get awkward. And it's going to get ugly before it gets better with that situation with the Sixers. So,
yeah. It's it's sad for me because I'm thinking about because I have Ben Simmons on my fantasy basketball team, and I've been hoping this whole time, like, please come back, please, because I took him because I'm like, there's no way this is gonna go for that long. There's no way this can go for the entire season, and I
yeah.
don't know. We'll have to see, but that's a scary situation.
Low risk, high reward
That's what my thought
situation with
was.
that
That's what my
guy.
thought was right there. But so far, he's giving me a big fat 0 and taking up my IR spots on my bench, and everyone's catching COVID, so I'm having so many players that are missing, and it's it's so bad.
And
uh,
and it's funny we say that about, like, the low risk, high reward thing. That's what all of these tweener teams should be thinking as well
yeah,
too. Putting the Pacers back into the conversation. That should be something that they're considering. Is obviously they don't need anyone like Sabonis or Turner,
yeah,
but turning around picks and stuff like that, packaging it with Caris Levert, see what they say about the Sixers say about that, and but I don't think that's where the Sixers are going to go. But there's a lot of tweener teams that could put something together and just take Ben Simmons on regards to that, like a low risk, where the risk, there's not really that much risk bringing him
yeah,
in, because he either is going to play or he's not, right? And then the high reward is he comes out and he's Ben Simmons of old.
yeah. It's definitely, as of right now, looking at the two teams of the Blazers and the Pacers. The Pacers obviously have the better package that they can give. So, like you're saying, I say there's no way that Ben Simmons can come to the Blazers unless it's a 3-team trade. But even then, I still don't see it. But yeah, crazy, crazy stuff. Next topic, Zion. There's been so on the Load podcast, there was, I forget exactly who we're talking, but they're having a conversation actually about Luka at first, and they were saying because Luka actually comes into the season at 260 pounds. Luka comes in pretty overweight, and they're like, oh, you want to talk about overweight? Now let's talk about Zion. Zion is being reported to be over 330 pounds. Jeff, what do you think about this?
So I did a little bit of my own research too. There's people that are trying to diffuse that that's the actual amount, but I think he's north of 300, right?
Yeah,
I
I
do
think so.
think that he's north of 300. We've talked about that in the past, about how he's over north of 300. So I'm not going to go as high and say he's 330, right? But the reason why I say that is, there Sham was on what's his name? Pat McAfee's pod, and he was refuting that, not saying directly that he couldn't corroborate that he was actually at 330. The photos that I'm sure people have seen of him leaving the court, where he's in a red suit, where he looks hefty. Apparently, those were doctored photos. So there's that also that's being heard of. But I'm more concerned about, he was supposed to be 2 to 4 weeks. And where's the reports about him getting closer to what he needs to be at? Andrew Lopez was reported that he was playing 4-on-4s, and then they had to stop some of that because he was getting foot soreness. So that's something that I'm keeping in mind, obviously, with the weight as well. So I can't say 100% he's at 330. That's all I'm thinking. But more along the lines, my biggest concern on this is, when is he going to be on the court again? And it does not look like it's going to be anytime soon.
It's so yeah, like you're saying, can we actually confirm he's 330? No. But I mean, if you look at it, so when he first came to the league, Zion was always a big guy. Zion was always listed at like I think I just looked it up. He was at 284. He was listed when he came into the league. So he was always the heaviest player for his just even his position. I think the Zion is what, 6'6", 6'7", around there, and he's 284. The only player that's actually close to his weight was Boban, who's like 7'2". Like, there's a big discrepancy there. So, I mean, looking at just at his physique, then he was a big guy, but he was still kind of like, you could just see he's just a big body. Now he looks thick. He looks chunky. Like, so he's definitely, like you're saying, north of 300. Exactly 330, who knows? But like you're saying, he's coming back into practice, and if he's having foot soreness, like, this man's not going to be able to work out and do all this stuff to lose some weight. It's such a mess with him, because he has so much talent. He has all the potential there. It is just that it just seems his body's not conducive to play, 82 games of an NBA season. It's just not. And that's why we don't see players of Zion's size and Zion's weight doing the things that he does, because it doesn't happen, because it's just not how, the body's supposed to take that much, force when he jumps and all that stuff. It's crazy.
I think another thing too is that people are forgetting, because now we're looking at a couple superstars where we're saying the same thing about them being overweight, right? Is that the external factor of this whole thing is that COVID is still a real thing. Yeah. So because of that, you're relying a lot more on how giving players a little bit more leeway to how they train themselves. And I'm sure that there's a lot of things that would have been, or that the team would keep close records of in the past about how players are handling stuff, that they just can't naturally do because of the limitations that COVID has brought upon, right? So that's why I think we're seeing now a Luka being overweight. We see a Harden being overweight. We see Zion be overweight, and there's really no checks and balance on telling a player, hey, like, I don't think this is something that they could even put onto a clause of a contract, because I don't think the NBA PA would allow it. But there should be a clause on like maintained fitness in contracts, because it's getting ridiculous. And if these guys, which you've seen their games regress a little bit because of the weight, but it's not like they're completely different players because of their weight, is why no one has drastically said anything crazy about what they're doing. But at the same time, there should be clause about fitness in my mind on how players should be in peak fitness to maintain the type of money that they're owed.
It's funny because, these guys that we're talking about, like you mentioned, the Zion, Luca, Harden, they're the top of the top. So even though that they're overweight, they're
Mhm.
still like able to do the things that they're that most players can't even dream of. And so that's
Yeah.
why like it's not the biggest problem until you get to Zion where it's like injuries and all that. But it's really funny to see like these guys, dad bods and everything, and then just going out there torching everybody and all this. Um, and then I'm sure at the same token, other guys kind of can't afford to, if unless you're like at the level of a Luca or Harden. How can you show up to training camp overweight and all this stuff? Like,
Exactly.
you're gonna get cut from the team immediately. So like these guys have to take it more seriously than them. And like you see all the videos and pictures of like Luca during the off season, like smoking a cigar, like chilling on a boat, and like, but yet this man's still one of the best players out there.
Well, I think another thing that comes to mind with that too is just the value of winning nowadays.
Yeah,
We saw how people would commit greatness and say like I'm giving up on this so I could become better. Like you hear infamously about like how Kobe studied like ballerinas so he could,
yeah,
get his footwork to a level that was surpassing everyone around them. It's those type of little things that cause them to win, right? And
mhm,
we watch what LeBron does with his body for X amount of years, putting millions of dollars into it.
yeah,
It's that same mindset. I understand that you might not want to put in all of that money, but I do expect you to at least have optimal shape coming
yeah,
into profession you have. If my profession outside of this is in sales, and if I decide I don't ever want to learn about anything that could progress my career, like I
yeah.
I will pay for that, even if I'm the greatest salesman ever. We all pay for those decisions, and those decisions that those guys made will pay off the consequences and later into the season.
Yeah, I wonder if like, because anyone that's listening and us as well, Jeff, like you play basketball, we're sweating, we're getting an amazing workout in. These guys practice basketball so much. How are they so overweight still? Although, yet you're running up and down the floor, burning probably thousands of calories if they're playing in a game or a pickup game or anything like that. Like, how does this happen?
Has to be the extraneous like lifestyles. I
Yeah.
mean, we don't really go too in depth about that and on the podcast, but like you got to think about some of the things that Harden's done in his career have never negatively impacted his health, but not affected in like a day to day. You look at him, you don't see it, but year to year, it starts to be more glaring when you
Yeah.
allow for him to just repeat those patterns, right?
Hmm.
So it's a little bit on that player to decide, hey, this is not a healthy pattern for someone that's of my level to be playing at. Because when you see Harden playing and you see Kevin Durant playing, you could clearly see where the gap is because of what decisions they made in their
Hmm.
careers, right? And that's what I think is similarly in that same situation. I remember last year we looked at Kyrie was out of the game for 2 weeks and he came back and didn't miss a step because
Yeah.
he's always in top shape. He's always working on his game, even when he's not around the game. But if I think that Harden sat out 2 weeks for any extraneous reasons, right? He's not coming back the same player. Like in two
Yeah.
weeks, he's gonna look out of shape. He's not gonna look good. And honestly, it has only been like this month when I started to see Harden regaining that burst that he had. Granted, he had the hamstring issue, but soft tissue injuries really do come from late.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well, that's where even when they were talking about on the Low podcast, they mention of like what Luca kind of does, like he relies on the season to get in shape. Like he doesn't. I guess he's not playing as many games and all this during the off season. So he comes in overweight. He starts slow, and then as the season progresses, he gets better and better because he's in better shape. And like you're saying, it makes sense that kind of like Harden's in that same boat right now. Yeah. Wow. Next, do you want to move on to our next topic? So, there has been a report that unvaccinated players starting on January 15th are no longer going to be able to play in games in Toronto, and that they're not going to be able to is it that they can't go into Canada? I don't remember exactly, but I just know they're not allowed to play in those games.
I believe that Canada did already that if you're not vaccinated, you can't come to Canada first or something along those lines.
I'm not sure, honestly.
I think what it was, which was dropped first, and then the NBA made their memo.
Yeah.
Because was that, yeah, like you said, starting that day. So yeah, Canada released in November 19th that it had exemptions for fully vaccinated athletes at that point, allowing them to play, but they revised it on November 19th that starting the 15th that wouldn't be a thing. So once again, it's kind of like the New York situation. The NBA isn't really making that legislation. It's really they're keeping in accordance with the local government and what they're saying. But the NBA did take the step to say that if you decide to leave the country as well, and it's excluding Canada, including Canada.
Yeah.
And so if you decide during All-Star break that you want to go to another country with your family for vacation and you're unvaccinated, that they will not allow you to play as well. So that's where the NBA is kind of putting their foot down a little bit, but it really still isn't that much. And then we're looking at it right now. It's directly impacting only 15 players now.
That's
so
crazy.
So it's honestly interesting to see that at this point. It really isn't impacting that much of the league anymore. It's a select few, and then what comes from that as well is that they're also adding the booster recommendation as well to the players.
Yeah,
and up to 60% of 60% of the league has the booster already. So
that's it's nice to see at least everyone's following all the compliance stuff that they have to do. So that's crazy to see that there's only 15 players. I mean, do we know the list of those 15 players right as of right now? Maybe we can make some guesses.
Obviously, we know the notable names, but like I said, one of those names that no one really talks about is Ben Simmons. He's one of those players that is not vaccinated.
So whoever trades for him as well, that's an issue.
That in mind, exactly.
Yeah. So like we're definitely gonna know eventually who those 15 players are because they're not going to be playing in those games, but unless they get vaccinated now. But it's crazy. It's and I wonder if this is gonna move on to the rest of the states and see what happens there. But 15 players no longer allowed to play in Toronto.
We'll see. We'll see how long that long from this. So we'll see.
I had very quick rumor mill roundup. We don't have to go too far. There's only two things. It wasn't outside of all the Blazer stuff. There's only a little bit, but so quickly, TJ McConnell had surgery to repair a torn ligament in his right hand and is expected to miss several months and possibly the entire season. So this is maybe, so Jeff, what do you think about TJ McConnell for the Pacers having this?
Saved from the trade. Saved from the trade. It's very timely for him. Obviously, speedy recovery. I know we're
Yeah.
being a little cynical with that, but speedy recovery. Hopefully, he gets back before the season ends. But honestly, he is saving. This injury has effectively saved him from being traded to the
Yeah.
situation. I think that he is going to be a player that may be considered to package on for salary matching when they make a trade.
Yeah. He's a very solid player, and I feel like any team would actually be happy to have him. And he just signed a contract, a nice contract this offseason. So yeah, speedy recovery. Like you're saying, saves himself from a trade. It is true though. I mean, maybe he still does get traded, but I doubt it now. Now he's gonna miss the rest of the season. Next. This one actually kind of surprised me. So this is from Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer, that executives believe that the Kings could trade De'Aaron Fox as part of a big trade package. What do you think about that?
Well, then that leads me to one of the things that I did see on Pacers Reddit, and it was an interesting one. It was moving Marvin Bagley and De'Aaron Fox for Sabonis and Karis. I don't know if it tips the scale for me, but like
Yeah.
that would look nice to me.
Yeah.
Seeing them paired up if they decide, hey, we're just going to move the Sabonis, Domantis Sabonis, and Karis, and then we're going to recommit to Turner and see how Fox fits into this. But then it just puts you in an awkward situation where, like, oh, welcome, you're still here.
Yeah.
So you don't want to alienate the guy you just signed, but at the same time, I do think that that is interesting. It definitely is interesting because I think that means that the Sixers, not the Sixers, the Kings are kind of trying to, show their skirt a little bit to the Sixers and say, hey, they're interested over here. So that's what it seems like a little bit to hear that in the news. So we'll see what comes of it. I think it is them just trying to signal that, yep, we're in the run-ins in the Ben Simmons sweepstakes. So
yeah, I actually never really thought that the Kings would even consider trading Fox. I mean, they do have a lot of really good guards right now, but I just never really thought it was on the table. But especially with Davion Mitchell playing as well as he is right now, it kind of probably opens up the door for them. And like, this is a real possibility. And if they can get someone, we talked about it all the time. I like the fit of Ben Simmons on the Kings. If Ben Simmons is playing like small forward there, you have those other two guys. Like Davion is not a complete point guard. Tyrese Halliburton is not a complete point guard. Like, and then you have Ben Simmons handling the ball. I love that fit. But will it happen? To be determined.
Davion being an off night.
Off night. Man, that guy's defensively something else, and he's not a tall guy, but hey, he gets the job done. He gets the job done. We talked a little bit about this off air. You said you want to do a little local news roundup?
Yeah, local news roundup to our two New York teams. Wanted to get a little bit of talking about them. It's been a little while now.
Yes.
Last night, the Nets played the Hawks. Hawks are actually rounding up back into being the team that they looked like last year. But, there's some glaring holes still on their team after watching the game last night. Obviously, TLC should not be starting any team, but as of right now, he is because the injury concerns that the Hawks have. But they're starting to look like the team that they were before. Trae Young, another guy that in the beginning of the season, he's not going to make free throws anymore, as everyone was saying. But he's still the same player he was last year and the year previous. So happy to see that. But one thing that I wanted to speak on about the Nets situation, and something that I saw in that game that I'm seeing happening this year, is that the Nets held held the Hawks in the fourth quarter to 14 points. That was a very stout defensive game in that sense.
Yeah.
And it's starting to mold my perception of what this team in the absence of Kyrie are going to be, and they're going to need to be, is a defensive-minded team. And it's crazy to think that 14 points, when you say that, sounds so glaringly like that's a great defensive effort. Just 2 games ago, when they were playing a person that we mentioned on this pod, Luka, similar result in the fourth quarter is holding the Mavs to 13 points in the fourth quarter. And like I said, the Nets are starting to round themselves into being a defensive-minded team. But now what they're trailing off of, because they're heavily defensive-minded, is they just don't have the shooters right now. Granted, you have the biggest what if in the world right now, Kyrie not around, and then you now have Joe Harris also being sidelined by injuries, is causing why they just don't have the shooting. But I think this was the best thing that could happen for them in the worst situation possible, is that they found a defensive identity, and I think that this is something that they could carry throughout the whole season. What do you think about that?
I think it's gigantic, and I think it's like you said, it's probably the biggest outcome that we've seen from the Nets, because at least I wasn't expecting them to be this good defensively this year. Especially, we know like the Nets, their thought process, at least last season, was a lot of, we're going to score more than you, and we don't care how many points you put up. We got 3 of the best scorers right now on our team, and it doesn't matter. We're still going to win the game. And as we're seeing this year, without Kyrie, like you mentioned, they kind of changed their game still, to the point that defensively, like this is a different team. I was looking at it now. So currently the Nets are ranked 10th in offense, but they're ranked 9th in defense. And that is pretty mind-blowing to think about. Like, even the players that they have, of like Kevin Durant and Harden, these aren't guys you necessarily think of putting that extra effort on the defensive end, but yet so far these guys have been pretty incredible. And the team defense is there. Man, the Nets are scary. If Kyrie ever comes back, oh man, that's going to be insane. Yeah.
Unsung hero in my mind of this whole situation is Bembry.
Yes.
Andre Bembry. I did not expect, when he was signed, you had thoughts that he would be the first cuts, one of the first cuts, when they thought of, like, when they brought in Demboya, and they brought him in at the same time. You thought, okay, these are 2 guys that are going to eventually be cut. So for him to go from that to where he's very impactful in the early part of the season, to he's now affecting how even James Harden defends.
Yeah.
Because he's telling James Harden, you need to be more active on the defensive end when he's out there on the court. And it's driving them and pushing them to be more defensively sound, is something that I did not expect, but happy to have on the team. Another player that I don't know why personally I can't get behind liking the guy, but he's been another unsung guy, is James Johnson. James Johnson has come into the role and positively impacted the team, where he's looking more and more each and every game as he gets comfortable, like a Draymond Green light, like where he is helping facilitate the offense a little bit. He's helping get those loose rebounds. He's defensively minded. He's doing the little things that culminate into helping win, right? And those 2 guys, I really am appreciating what they're doing. And then the depth is really getting challenged. But I think that, like you said, if Kyrie comes back, you bring in back Joe Harris, this team just has the right amount of depth that is necessary for them to have a long run. But it's just tales of time. You gotta make it through all your health concerns. So I don't know when it's going to happen, but I feel there's going to be a period where Kevin Durant is going to have to sit out for an extended period, right?
Mm.
So what are the Nets going to look like in that period? And what are they going to prove to us in that period? So another thing I wanted to talk about and try to diffuse as well is Nets don't beat good teams. Is granted, they have lost a lot of games to who I consider the real finals contenders. They've lost to the Bulls. They've lost to the Suns. They've lost to the Warriors. Those are the three teams that come to mind when, as of right now, in this early part of the season, even the Heat and the Bucks as well. That to mind, and you think that they could, lift the Larry O'Brien. So it is glaring and sad to see them not being able to beat those teams. But in the last game that they played, one of those type of contenders against the Bulls, they fell short. But I loved everything that I saw in that game compared to what I saw in the previous game when they played the Bulls. Is the first game they had, and it kind of similarly fizzled out in the same way, but the first time that they played him, they had a sizable lead heading into the third quarter, heading into the fourth quarter, and they just faltered. Like, they just couldn't find a shot. They couldn't do what they had to do. In the second game, it was not like that. They remained defensively sound. Granted, Caruso got injured and missed the rest of the second half, but they held their own, and I think that that's going to speak volumes for them and resonate for them into if they have to play a team like this in the postseason. Is that we now know what the formula kind of looks like. We just got to perfect it and closing out these games against teams like this.
Yeah, there's a lot of season left to perfect that, and then at the same time, at least personally, I'm not worried too much about dropping these close games or whatever, because when playoff time comes, that's when Kevin Durant just goes insane, and it's like when you have like a scorers like Kevin Durant and James Harden, generally like scoring at the fourth quarter of like a playoff game is extremely tough. When you have guys like James Harden and Kevin Durant, like those guys just get buckets whenever they want to. So like, I think that just kind of like pushes them over the edge of a lot of other teams. Like you're saying, the defense and all that. I'm not worried about the Nets at all. I think they're in a great position. They've surprised me with the defense. You mentioned before about like Bembry and James Johnson. That just shows like the genius of Sean Marks of being able to find these guys low risk. You get a good reward just from signing them, and look how they're changing your team. And it's pretty incredible. Also, another interesting thing to see, this Nets team is probably not completely done constructing their roster, because we see it every year. The buyout market is always there. And when players want buyouts, who are the teams that they're going to? They're always looking at the Nets. They're always looking at, now it's probably going to be like around the Warriors and Suns and all this other stuff, and the Lakers. But we'll see. But generally the Nets, if I'm a player that's getting bought out and I want to go to a team to potentially win a championship, honestly, I think the Nets have a better shot, just because of, look at the West. Yeah, we're talking about like the West kind of isn't as strong as it usually been, but the top three teams in the West right now, and the Suns, the Warriors, both being 21 wins and 4 losses right now, and then just right behind them, you have Utah. Like, I'd rather not deal with all those teams. Let me go to the Nets, where it's a lot easier, probably, of a chance going forward.
Now let's shift our conversation to the New York Knicks. It's been a little difficult this last couple of weeks with where they are currently. They played Toronto last night. Unfortunately, they were able to stage a comeback, but they fell short
The fake
in the
comeback.
last
Every
in the
time.
last couple of minutes. So what do you have to say about that, Brian?
Man, the Knicks right now, something's wrong. I honestly, I'm expecting them to make a move this trade deadline. Something needs to happen right now because things are just not going where they need to be. Well, there's two main reasons that I see. One, Julius Randle. Julius Randle is just not being the same player as he was last season. Last season, Julius Randle was a 40% three-point shooter. He was doing all this. He was hitting extremely tough shots. This season, he's just not there. And it's a considerable drawback from what he was last season. And Tip said it all the time last season of, this man is our engine. He's the thing that makes the team go. So this season we're seeing he's not that player anymore. And when your engine's kind of gone, you don't really have anyone else that can step up. And they're looking terrible. You have so two main problems: Julius Randle and then RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett was having one of the worst stretches of his career, like the last 20 games. Recently, he's been picking it up, but I mean, he said that he's been battling like a stomach virus or something like that, and that's what's been stopping him. And that last game that they had against the Nets, when he played like 5 minutes, and then he said he ran to the bathroom and like vomited everywhere, and then that's when he never came back to the game. Like, he's saying he's been having that problem, but man, he was so terrible. And the one thing about RJ Barrett is his highs are extremely high. Like when he's doing well, it's like, wow, we have a promising young player. But when he's doing bad, he is probably one of the worst players on the floor. And it's such a polarizing kind of play. And it's really frustrating to see that. Right now, currently, the Knicks are ranked 22nd in defense. And it's like, it's tough. And it's frustrating as a fan because last season, the team was actually worse. The team didn't have as much talent as they did now. And of course, the talent that they had on that team got better over the offseason. The problem is, it's just that effort that was there last season is just not there this season. Everyone talked about it. You heard like Anthony Edwards was like, look at the Knicks. Like they're why are they good on defense? Because they put so much effort into that. This season, we're just kind of not seeing that. I've been seeing Julius Randle too many times put his head down and just not hustle back. And after maybe not getting a call or something like that, just pouting and stuff like that. Like, this is not what you need. The team is a mess right now.
I had this discussion with you on pod previously. Is I'm still of the mindset I think you have to insert quickly into this lineup. And I know we discussed why he's not a part of this lineup. But I think quickly provides you more of a threat on offense with that group of guys. When you bring out Fournier, who's there to help out, space out the floor. Robinson's clogging up the lane. Randall's doing his thing. Stephen A. Smith always says the thing about he doesn't have a right hand, but that's not true. Like if you watch the games, you'll see that he does lead with his left because he's a lefty, but he does have he can go right if he needs to, right? But I think it's best that you get a guy like Quickly that can, augment some of the stuff that is a concern on the offensive side of it. Move the floor around where you make Mitch a little bit more of a threat, those lob threats that he already is doing with Obi off of the bench. But got to find a way where Randall needs the ball, but Quickly, I think if he has the ball, will make the better decisions on who should have the ball at the given time. At this moment, I think that you should have a little bit more of the mindset of what you had in the early part of last year, where there wasn't that dominant player, right? Julius just ascended into that dominant player. And then at that point, everyone assumed the roles. Right now, it feels like a team that is trying to assume that role and say that it's Julius, but Julius is just not up to the task at this moment.
Yeah.
So now it's in disarray, right? But I think a lot of that gets diffused if you have someone that's a little bit more point guard oriented in that starting lineup than Burks, because Burks is good. I do like he's shooting phenomenally from 3-point,
Yeah.
right? He's 44%. But you still need someone that is more of a facilitator, and they kind of lack that with the 3-point guards that they have on the team. But Quickly is the closest in my mind to being more of a facilitator than and what Derrick Rose and what obviously Kemba doesn't play anymore.
Yeah.
But when he was on the court, is. So
It's
I don't know.
it's so tough just because, well, the thing is the team doesn't really, like, looking at it, they just don't have a lot of good players. Like, what they have, like Alec Burks, like he's having a good year so far, but Alec Burks, the reason why he's been a journeyman his entire career is because he's inconsistent. Some games he looks fantastic and it's like, whoa, how does no one like this guy? Next thing you know, he has a game like last night where he's 0 for 7 from the field and does nothing. And and then like with Randall, I would love for someone else to have the ball other than Randall, because a lot of times the offense looks so bad because what they do, they try to get the ball to Randall, they try to facilitate and have Randall create the offense. But what happens is Randall's posting up at the 3-point line. Like, come on, you're a giant body. Try to get closer to the rim, but he's posting at the 3-point line, and then he's getting double teamed. He passes it to somebody else. Maybe he turns it over, but he passes to somebody else, and then that player can't hit an open shot. And then it's just like they're just missing that talent there. And the definitely what I can see from this year, which didn't happen last year, is the lack of the offense talent that they have and the creation that they're getting from the offense is just leading to their defense, and it's affecting their defense. So when they're playing terrible on offense, they're not hustling back. They're not doing the things that they need to do. And we'll see what happens. I'm kind of for the Myles Turner thing of just like, I would love to see, like you mentioned, of Robinson kind of clogs the lane. I would love to see Randall play with a more offensive minded, or not offensive, but can stretch the floor kind of center. That'd be nice. And still, I mean, Myles Turner is, I think, the leading shot blocker right now. And so you're not actually losing much on the defensive end. I think it's a great fit, but who are you going to trade? That's the tough thing. Obi Toppin has been really good, but he's been coming off the bench. So as long as Randall's playing on the team, I don't see Obi Toppin getting a ton of minutes. So far, they've been trying to play Obi Toppin and Randall at the same time and go small, and it's kind of worked here and there, but it's not going to work against every team. And we have to see more. As of right now, I'm pretty down on the Knicks. They just have been looking terrible, no effort. That's my biggest thing. As long as you're giving effort, it's a fun game to watch. But as of right now, I'm not having a good time watching these New York Knicks. But I'm still a little bit hopeful for the future. We'll see what happens.
I had one thing that I saw too. It was a glaring stat that made me just go like, is this actually real? Is they were comparing the last game, the starting points, and you have the Raptors having up to 80 of their points came from their starters, right? And then the Knicks had 48 coming from their starters.
Yep.
So obviously, it just shows the dominance that is coming off their bench. Their bench is not, without question, one of the best benches in the league, but it's how they're constructed in that starting lineup that is causing this ugly head to rear out.
Yeah, the offense, that's exactly what you said. Like, their bench is the only thing that's actually leading their team. And it's the starting lineup is just, something's missing. And that's where they need to do something, because, you tried Kemba, that did not work out. Actually, the biggest thing that I've been saying is kind of like there's actually an interesting stat about Fournier. So when Fournier scores more than 18 points in a game, the Knicks are currently 7-0. But when he scores less than that, I think the numbers might have changed since I looked at the stat, but they're like 5-15, and it's like it's a
that man the ball.
Yeah, it's a huge discrepancy. But like they do give him the ball. It's just that sometimes he's just not good. He just misses his shots and he takes bad shots. And I would love to see him maybe use a little bit more instead of more of like just a catch and shoot kind of player, because Fournier can do a little bit more than that. We'll see what happens. But yeah, so far the New York Knicks, big struggle. Julius Randle not looking like the player like he was last year. I hope he can come back. It gets me a little bit worried. I mean, they just gave this man a big paycheck, big extension for next year. So does this bite them in the butt? Who knows? But we'll see if he gets better.
Hopefully it does. Myles Turner time.
Yeah, Myles Turner time. I mean, hey, they actually worked out together in the offseason a lot. And this is why I thought this is the reason why I was following Myles Turner, is because I was like, yo, they're going to get him in the offseason. They're going to do something. And then nothing happened. But the conversations are starting to pick up again. And Myles Turner wants out. Is he the answer? Most likely not. But but it's you just need something more. They just need change right now. Do you have anything you want to say before we call it a show?
I think that's it on my side.
Word. So, like I always mention, check out the Twitter. Jeff consistently put it in the work on the Twitter. It's at For the Love of the Game. So make sure, look there. It's all in our descriptions as well. Check our YouTube channel. I've been having so much fun doing this podcast every week. It's my therapy right now because the Knicks are just so bad. I need to talk basketball, but I kind of hate talking about Knicks basketball right now, and I'm trying to not consume as many like Knicks podcasts and all this other stuff, just because like it's depressing. So this helps a lot. Thank you for doing this with me every week, Jeff. And thank you to the listeners. And yeah, this is another fun one. And that is episode 12.
Peace.